People who ran into the girl that rejected you in the past, how did it go? Went into pharmacy to get an oral enema to prepare for my colonoscopy. As the pretty pharmacist asked me about the specifics, we slowly recognized each other. It had been about 30 years since I had cried asking her not to break up with me. Sigh. She stood me up on Valentine's Day 3 years ago. She's now my next door neighbor, talked to her a couple times, but we aren't friends or anything. We both pretended we didn't see each other cause deep down we're both awkward people, and we both remember how each of us handled the situation immaturely and badly. My dad met my mom at a local bar. At the time he was hanging out with some friends that apparently seemed dirtbaggy, so she gave him the number of a 7 to 11. 4 years later they are both at the same bar again. He thinks, oh, she looks familiar. He walks over and says, so how is 711 doing? To what she apparently laughed very hard at and then gave him her real number, LOL. I had an ugly duckling phase in early high school. Acne, my teeth were too big for my face, and my arms and legs resembled that of a baby giraffe. There was a girl, let's call her M, that I had a serious crush on. When homecoming came around, I worked up every bit of courage to ask her to go to the dance with me. I did it one-on-one to try and save myself some embarrassment if she said no. Instead of just saying no, she loudly exclaimed she would never be caught dead with someone like me, and then proceeded to tell everyone how she rejected me. 10 years later, I go into a department store to pick up some new clothes and she's working the area I happen to be in. I didn't recognize her, but she recognized me. I don't consider myself attractive, but I'm definitely not the ugly duckling I once was. She said as much and started talking about how great of friends we used to be. I didn't say much. The conversation of grabbing lunch to catch up came up, and that's when I halted the conversation and reminded her how cruel she was to me and left her standing there. I saw a girl from high school at a reunion. She never rejected me because I never had the nerve to ask. At the reunion she confessed that she had a crush on me. You miss all the shots you never take. That would kill me on the spot, I think. All that time wondering and never knowing until years later. That would definitely kill me. Met a guy back in high school in 2010. We talked and kinda liked each other but never admitted it, and apparently he thought I rejected him. Within a month, he moved schools and dated someone else. I dated someone else too. Fast forward 2 years later. Bumped into each other and found out we were both not seeing anyone. Started talking again but never really pursued it. He asked me out but didn't get to go because within 2 weeks, he left to another country for university. Stopped talking after a while due to time difference and eventually lost contact. 1.5 years later, I got in serious relationship with someone else. Another 6 years later, found him on Instagram and for some reason I greeted him on his birthday through DM. He only said thank you and didn't say anything else. 5 months later on my graduation, he DM'd to congratulate me. So I said thank you and didn't say anything else too, not petty, just didn't really have much else to say. Few days later, he just straight up asked if I wanted to go on a date with me. I soon learned that I was always at the back of his mind for years, and that he was low-key waiting and still hoping. Feelings were mutual as I too would always had that, what ifs, all these years. We found our way back to each other after 8 years and finally got married just few months ago, December 2021, after a decade of knowing each other. All those time wondering and never knowing killed us too, which was why he just bluntly asked me out the moment he had the chance. In his words, I wasted 2 chances before, I'm not wasting another. I met this woman near Christmas of 1999 or 2000, had a wonderful night of chatting, dancing, just a perfect night. I live near her so I drop her off in the taxi. She said she was leaving shortly for Australia so wasn't looking for anything major, but to give her a call later in the week and would go do something. She never responded. It was a wonderful night though, and something I always fondly remembered. Fast forward to 2019, I meet this woman on Tinder, we have a great brunch and end it with a hug and a kiss. Start seeing each other regularly. After a couple of weeks I drop her off at her mum's house. Looks so familiar, it's the same house I dropped that woman off 19 years ago. This woman I'm dating is that woman who doesn't remember it, doesn't remember me at all. Such a wonderful insight into how there's 2 sides to every tale. We didn't last long as a couple, but it was really interesting to be able to cross off one of those that got away. She came out as gay and broke my heart when we were 19. Took me a couple of years to get over it. I ran into her 10 years later in town. Wasn't too awkward then. She had a long-term partner, as did I, so had a brief chat and went on with our lives. We bumped into each other again a couple of times over the next few years. Some of the same friends, etc. Then a mutual friend died in an accident. We had a get-together a couple of months later with many folks who knew him, including my ex. We spent pretty much the whole night chatting. Turns out her partner had died recently from cancer. Freaking shame. She was a lovely woman. I'm happily married now and my ex knows this, so there was no flirting or anything like that. End of the night came when she told me, we were both quite drunk at this point, that we wasn't sure she was gay. I promptly made my excuses and left. Really didn't feel like continuing with any of the thoughts that brought up. Went home. Carried on with my life. She died last year. Depression led to her shutting herself off from her friends and family. The loss of her partner and general frailty led to her becoming malnourished and generally ill. Still freaking miss her. I fell hard for this lady in university. She did not feel the same way and I was emotionally damaged for a long time. I really liked her and it crushed me that the feeling wasn't mutual. Fast FWD 3 years, I get better, snap out of my depression and realize I was in the wrong for the way I ended things. She really liked me as a friend and genuinely cared for me. I reconnect with her and realize she's an awesome friend. She goes through some traumatic experiences and I'm there to support her, but because of this openness I start falling for her again. I'm ready to tell her that I don't think it's healthy for me to be friends like this and that I'm not angry she doesn't feel the same way. A couple days before I'm about to tell her, she says she's falling in love with me. We both realize we have a messed up history together but nonetheless give it a shot. We've been married for 3 years now. Not really rejected but dumped and re-met repeatedly. I met a girl in a bar and told her a big tale about how I was hitchhiking around Scotland tomorrow in an attempt to seem like I had some kind of personality and dynamism. It worked and we spent the night together, and during that drunken wild night she decided to accompany me the next day as I went hitchhiking, for a week, around Scotland. So I did what any horny 19-year-old would do, I agreed we should totally do it. 2 strangers drunkenly sharing a one-man tent, sleeping in laybys and on traffic roundabouts. Of course it was a freaking total disaster. Too many ridiculous stories to tell. But 4 days later she'd had enough and rode off across a loch with a handsome ex-forces guy to visit an island. A euphemism. I went to a bar and when I woke up her stuff was gone from the tent. I didn't see her again until 15 years later. I bought a house. The neighbor opposite with 3 kids, lawyer husband, badly parked Jaguar blocking the road, it's her. That first day, in 1 second we locked eyes and knew we had to handle this like adults. So, for the next 10 years we avoided ever speaking or acknowledging each other's existence. Luckily 3 years ago we resolved awkwardness as she took the gracious option of moving house. Awkwardness resolved. She rejected me again. This time for a home loan. Still no interest then. Went on a Tinder date with a girl who had just moved to the city. Date went alright, no major sparks or anything, but seeing as though she was new to the city I offered to meet up again, which she initially seemed interested in. A couple weeks later we planned to meet up but at the last minute cancelled, saying that she was all itchy and thinks she might have the chicken pox. I thought it was a bit strange, a 25 years old getting chicken pox, but who am I to judge? I told her not to worry, and MSG me when she's feeling better to reschedule. Now with no date and a free Friday evening I hit up a few friends who are meeting up at one of their apartments for drinks and board games. As I'm on my way there my buddy MSGs the group, he's got a friend in town for the weekend and wants to know if it's okay if he comes along with another friend who just moved to the city. Not thinking anything of it, we all agree that the more the merrier. I arrive at the apartment and as soon as I walk through the door, who is there sitting on the carpet? None other than Chicken Pox Girl, the friend of a friend who had just moved to the city. It all clicks. It takes her a second to realize, but when she does she instantly drops her glass of red wine all over a white rug. I've never seen anyone look so embarrassed. I make a quick joke that she had the fastest case of chicken pox in the world and she hastily made her exit. All my friends were wondering what was going on when she left and I finally filled them in. We all had a good laugh and enjoyed the rest of the night and the memory of the Chicken Pox Girl. Rejected me because I was a geek. Married to me now because I'm a geek. She rejected me again. This is life. This is how you know you are not in the Matrix. We bumped into each other buying lawn darts at Walmart. She was pregnant and in Cookie Monster PJs, and I was in what were essentially male booty shorts, as my friend's swim trunks fit too short. We were literally both buying packs of lawn darts. We laughed, but both knew deep down inside that Walmart run was embarrassing AF. Not exactly a rejection, but after going off to college my then GF from high school told her ultra-religious mother that we'd been fooling around. Her mother had her break up with me and confessed to their entire church what she'd been doing with me. A few years ago I heard from a friend in my hometown and he told me that my ex-GF had never done anything after that. She went to college, but it was a local school and she never moved out of her mom's house. She never got a job in her field and still, 20 years later, has the same job she had in high school, not just the same employer, the same position. She never even dated again after her mom broke us up. It's like she's been stuck in stasis since that time. My best friend from HS posted a picture after he ran a marathon. Some girl commented on it trying to get his attention and he was quite harsh rejecting her. When I saw who it was the one who rejected and humiliated me in middle school over 15 years before this. Peeked a bit into her profile and let's just say time didn't treat her well. We started dating again. Then she dumped me out of the blue. Again. Then when I decided to move to another state, she tried to reconnect on Instagram and desperately apologized for the way she treated me and wants to visit me when she comes out here. No freaking way. I really hope when I'm 35 I'm not as lost in life as she is. Not exactly rejected the first time around. But we ran into each other randomly years later and she's my wife now. Back around 11th grade, I had the biggest crush on a girl a class ahead of me. On paper, it never should have worked. I was a bit of a nerd by choice and somewhat of a loner by no choice of mine. She was the star of the basketball team and was the homecoming queen and all that. But we had a class together and really got along great and there was a lot of chemistry there. We hung out constantly for a whole semester and had a great time. Right before Christmas break things finally went great one night and I think we both realized how we felt about each other. Except that didn't last long. A lot of the other popular girls started making fun of her and giving her a hard time for liking the class weirdo, and she pretty much ghosted me and didn't talk to me anymore. That hurt bad. It was my first real crush on someone that actually liked me back, so to have that happen at a tender age like that was an absolute dagger to the heart. Around 3 or 4 months later, I went on a school trip with just a few other kids. Another girl in the same class ahead of me seemed super cool and I was really impressed when she was looking through a vintage store and was interested in some old band stuff and bought an old Aerosmith concert poster. I remember her shouting at me on the bus and thinking I really should talk to her and that she seemed super cool. Well, flash forward about 20 years and that same Aerosmith poster is hanging in our garage. Since then, we've traveled the world, been to a lot of music festivals, and have had a ton of adventures together. If that homecoming queen hadn't dumped me after leading me on for so many months, I'd have not met my wife of over 15 years now. 11th grade me had no way of knowing that at the time. My old crush is doing well, we still keep in touch on Facebook and have run into each other a few times at class reunions and stuff like that. I don't think there's any animosity at all, maybe just some natural well-meaning awkwardness. She's married and has 2 kids and has done great in her career and I am really happy for her and don't have any hard feelings about it, especially considering how things turned out. I lost 100 pounds and was in the gym and looked really good. She told me as much and we talked for a bit about our kids and where our lives had went. She and I remained friends after she rejected me. She was always very nice to me and I had no reason to have any animosity towards her. I wished her well, kissed her on the cheek and moved on. It was a nice interaction. Never been rejected, boys, I'm too cowardly to ask LOL. So shortly after my high school GF and I broke up, my friend introduced me to a friend of his through Facebook. I was incredibly desperate, short on social skills, and generally pretty depressed. I was under all the right conditions to unhealthily latch onto this girl he introduced me to. We started out with texting, just making small talk and being polite, but when I asked if she wanted to meet up she would always make some excuse or stop replying, generally the latter. I was a dumb kid though, so I took none of her hint and kept at it. Looking back afterwards, it was easy to see how pushy I was and how anyone would interpret it as creepy. I finally let things go for a while after I had flowers delivered to her at work. I know, I'm cringing while thinking about it. She didn't really seem to respond to the flowers, so I moved on. About a year later I got a new job at her place of employment and we started working together. By now I'd built up some confidence and learned some restraint. Surprisingly, she was still friendly with me. We would hang out some and occasionally when the talk would turn flirty she wouldn't shut it down. She became my best friend that year. We had so many little fun moments together and although we never dated, I made some of the best romantic memories of my life with her. One night on the way home from work, her car had a blowout. Knowing I was nearby, she called me and asked for help. So I came by, jacked up her car, and changed her tire for her. It's dumb I know, but we were both young and it was this cheesy romantic movie moment where I had come to her rescue and saved the day. She and I would talk about it for years afterward on how special a memory it was. Our timing never lined up though, and she met a man that December and married him 2 years later. I met my wife and we've been together for over 10 years now. A couple of years ago, the girl from my story passed away. Our last words spoken to each other weren't the best, unfortunately. I think we each thought we were mad at each other for drifting apart. Now I just wish I could go back and tell her that she was one of my dearest friends and I'm sorry for whatever part one played in us drifting apart. Shortly after her headstone was placed, I bought a little wooden toy car jack and placed it on her grave. I last bumped into her around 15 years after graduating high school, which itself was about 15 years ago. I'm old. She'd moved away but was back in town and called me to see if I wanted to get together. Although I was crazy about her back in school, she was never interested in me, so our relationship was strictly the friendly sort. And we remained friends for a decade or so until she moved away and I lost touch with her. When she called, I thought it would be a great idea to meet up with her, if just to see what she'd been up to. I was in a relationship at the time, but I hadn't had any romantic interest in this girl for an awful long time, so I wasn't exactly worried about anything happening. And nothing did. We went out to a bar, she had some drinks, we caught up and that was that. But then on the way home she asked me a question that really threw me for a loop. She wanted to know why we'd never dated before. I thought it was a joke at first. I'd asked this girl out an obnoxious amount of times, likely why I ended up being friend-zoned in the first place. But she was serious. She wanted to know why I'd never asked her out. I sort of laughed it off, totally aware of the implications, which is impressive considering how socially inept I can be. However, instead of being excited that the girl I'd pursued all throughout high school was suddenly interested in me, I couldn't help but feel hurt. I bottled up my feelings for her a long time ago, and pretending like I never had those feelings was downright painful. I never spoke to her again after that night. So I have no idea how things turned out for her. And it doesn't matter, because I'm happy. I married the girl I was dating at the time and we've got a wonderful life together. I've never second-guessed my choice that night, and never will. I wouldn't trade away the life I have for anything in the world. I ran into her picking out wedding rings with her wife. It wasn't too awkward. But I was a complete creep earlier. My friends and family were encouraging me to just keep trying. I look back on my late teens and early 20s with a variety of cringe. It's been 3 years since she rejected me, I didn't confess in time. In these 3 years I started dating with other gorgeous girl, thought that I found my soulmate, was preparing everything to propose in February, but oh well, we broke up. She also had been through a lot, broke up with her BF at the time and here we are now, dating. Life is a funny thing. I ran into one who happened to be going through a divorce. My younger self was like, good for you, you missed out, etc. But seeing her like that actually hurt. I am married with kids, so it wasn't anything like wanting to be with her, but man, it hurt. She was certain he was cheating on her but had no proof and the divorce was going bad. I said she could always text me for support, my number hasn't changed, and she said neither has hers. So I'm like, good of you to keep your number with marriage, etc. And she said it's still her plan. I told her to get the text messages from her carrier for his number. Wasn't hard to put together. The woman she suspected was the one he was texting every morning, every night, and all day long. She was my first love, and she broke my heart. I let it haunt me. About 4 or 5 years later, we actually started dating again, just long enough to realize we'd both grown in different directions. There was no there anymore. All we ever really had was that we were young together, which was great. But that time was in the past. It was a very therapeutic revelation. Set me free. I went to a concert to see one of my favorite bands. A girl noticed a tattoo I had on my side and showed me a similar one that she had. We talked a bit in between bands until I asked for her number to try to talk to her some. She said no, she wasn't cool with that, and I said alright, no worries, and enjoyed the rest of the concert. Few months pass by and the band rolls around again, and there she is again. Didn't try asking again because she already said no once before. We see tattoos, hug and how each other are doing and make small conversations. Enjoy the concert and go our separate ways. Few months pass by again and the band comes through. See her again, except this time we know each other without having to compare tattoos. We enjoy the show, and as we're leaving I notice she's basically trapped between two guys. She sees me and yells, "Hey, I've been looking for you." Ready to head back to the Airbnb. So I said, "I've been trying to find you too." "Yeah, I'm good to go." Walked her the few blocks back to where she was staying. We had a nice chat during the walk, and asked if she needs anything before I left since I had a good drive back home. And that was it. We talk at the occasional shows we see each other at and on IG from time to time, but I'm glad she felt comfortable enough knowing that she could trust me to make sure she was safe. She dodged this bullet. I look mine up on Facebook every once in a while out of curiosity. They are all doing great with big homes and lots of kids. I would have taken every one of them down a path of misery, despair, and hopelessness. Don't give up hope, pal. You still can drag them down. I was 15 and she had just turned 17, so she wasn't interested in me since I was younger than her. In hindsight, it's understandable considering she was about to graduate. It also didn't help that I lacked self-confidence, despite, in hindsight again, having no real reason to feel the way I did at the time. We did remain friends though, went to concerts together, etc., but platonically. As she started her young adult life, we eventually lost contact, particularly when I also began mine as well, and our lives took us in different directions. Probably about 10-ish years later after contact loss, we reconnected via FB and hung out again like we did when we remained friends. I could tell as time went on, she was giving me all the signals it was impossible to miss, and these were the most glaring signals possible short of saying I want you. But I just wasn't interested in her anymore. Having to force myself to act like I didn't have a crush on her when I was younger while being strictly platonic friends really worked, and I no longer felt anything for her. Nothing sparked when she would drop the signals, and I mean nothing. It was a complete 180. She reacted very harshly to me stating I just wanted to be friends and she refused. The double standard was so vivid it was incredible. She asked me to set aside my feelings to just be friends when we were young, but when I asked her to do the same when we were older it was just simply too much for her. I had a girlfriend who invented an entire fake relationship with another guy just so she wouldn't have to tell me she just didn't like me. She basically ghosted me and then convinced people who we both knew to casually mention her new relationship. This went on for almost a year, with her false relationship deepening and becoming more and more successful. I had really liked her, and learning about her new, fake, relationship hurt a bunch, to say nothing of the fact that I wish she had just talked to me about it. I was disappointed when I heard about the new relationship's success, but treated it like losing to the team that goes and wins the Super Bowl. At least I lost to the champ, you know? One of our mutual acquaintances started feeling guilty about the whole thing and blew her cover, and I just felt deeply insulted. I admit that I had fantasies of running into her and just chewing her out like in a grocery store or whatever. I thought about it a few times over the course of the following year. Then, one day, it happened. I was walking down the hallway of one of the buildings on campus. We attended the same college, and I had maybe 10 seconds to prepare. All the things I had wanted to say to her coursed through my mind for what seemed like hours as I picked the right words to say. This was it. A chance to let her know how much she had hurt and insulted me for that year. I picked my moment carefully, not making eye contact until we were within taking range, looking up at just the right moment, pretending to recognize her for the first time as our eyes met, and then taking a slow breath to start. I said, "Hi." And she said, "Hi." And then I walked away because I'm a coward. She broke up with me as I was a loser who was never going to be a paramedic, and she was moving to California to work as a tree surgeon. A few years later I see her outside the ER, she upset, she clearly needs a hug and someone to talk to. Sadly I'm too busy being a paramedic, so I just smile and wave. Was classically told, I think we're better as friends, just over 10 years ago. Saw her again a couple of months ago and she said, "OMG, you're looking very well," multiple times, while also being a bit touchy. Creepiness aside, it felt damn good and left a smile on my face for the night. She denied me, as she didn't think she liked me the same way I liked her. A few years later, she came into my work, and we started talking again. I shoot my shot again, and now she is my wife. When I was a sophomore in college I had this prof who was just so nice in every way. I started going to her office hours every chance, and soon realized I was mesmerized by her intellect, the attention she seemed to give me. She was just being a good teacher, and her simple but elegant beauty. But 19 years old me wasn't gonna do anything. Next semester I had a chemistry lab course and got assigned to this girl who was just so fine, really well dressed, just like the prof, and I was intoxicated by how great she smelled. There's a lot of downtime in chemistry lab, so we started talking and I find out she's not living in dorms but lives at home in the college town. We had a connection of both being of Greek heritage. She tells me her mom is a great cook and makes the best spinach pie. I say no way is it better than my mom's, yada yada yada. She invites me to her house to sample some of her mom's pie. Yep, her mom was the prof. That night my dreams were something right out of Penthouse letters. I tried hard with the daughter, but she was having nothing of it. Let me off easy, I'll give her that. Anyway, about 10 years later I run into her at a wedding. I didn't recognize her, but she recognized me. We're catching up and she starts crying and tells me she's had 2 failed marriages. Bullet dodged. She still smelled great though. My dad actually came in with an awesome save for this story and dialed it way past what was necessary. Back when I was enrolled at my hometown college, I had a date with some girl I met on Tinder at my local favorite coffee shop. Cute, gamer, in the drum line, pretty smile, and the date was going great. We chat for about an hour about her new job at McAllister's and my upcoming plans following graduation. I mention a job I have lined up and a pretty nice consulting firm. She's impressed, and we move on to discussing what we should do for our next date. Soon after, a friend comes into the cafe asking if I had any updates from the judge, which, naturally, spooked this poor girl. I explained that while I was a younger, dumber kid, I got into some trouble, did a little time, came home, turned my life around, and was simply waiting to hear if the judge grant my request to cut my probation short. She didn't openly freak out, but that explanation clearly killed the vibe. Figuring it was time to cut my losses on this date, I suggested we wrap up, and that I would reach out to plan our second date sometime soon before we left the cafe. I think I sent a message or two hoping to pull that off, but that went unanswered. Oh well, life goes on. A month or two goes by, and I've started my new job, new joiner, bottom of the hierarchy, updated my wardrobe, got my first apartment in the city, and bought an older, but in great shape, BMW from my uncle. Eventually I visit my family back in my old college town, and my dad suggests we grab lunch somewhere. How about McAllister's? Nah, that girl from the date started that job there recently, let's just try whatever else. No way, what are the odds, I'm craving whatever. So I drive him over, and of course, she's front and center at the only register. I haphazardly say hey, how are you doing, and she politely asks if I got the job at the consulting firm. I say yes, and that so far it's going alright. My dad just cuts me off right then and goes, alright? Alright? Just alright? Don't be modest. My son here, oh man, he's doing great. He's picked out this beautiful high rise, he's making bank, and he's even started driving a BMW. Boy am I proud, you're making more than your mother and I put together. Which is why you're buying lunch. She ended up looking quite impressed, took our order, and asked if I'd still be interested in going on that second date while I was in town. While I politely declined, that felt great. I didn't start off making amazing money or anything, but it was totally worth buying Dad his meal that day. Bold of you to assume I got rejected, I never asked in the first place. I didn't actually run into her, but I almost got naked for her without knowing. My wife actually accidentally scheduled me a dermatology appointment with my grade school, middle school crush that rejected me numerous times. No, I won't skate with you at the roller rink to this song, Kinds of Rejection. Anyway, I thought her name sounded familiar. She got married and I've randomly had seen her new name on Instagram, and so I decided to Google the name to see who I was about to strip down naked for, cause I couldn't quite remember why I knew that name. That's when my stomach hit my throat as I saw her face, yep, still a hot blonde, on the dermatology company website. I quite literally ran out the damn building. Ghosted all calls from their office wondering where the hell I went and if I wanted to reschedule. I chose the possibility of skin cancer over that awkward appointment. I did end up going to a different dermatologist though eventually, no skin cancer, just emotional damage. I saw her in the shopping mall in passing, nudged my wife, then waved to her. She pretended I didn't exist. I'm fine with that, my life is pretty good now, I hope hers is too. I was at Target, buying a large TV with my fiancé. I hadn't seen her in years and didn't recognize her at first when she called my name. She had gained a fair amount of weight, not that she looked bad, and I believe she was a little embarrassed of it. My fiancé looked somewhat similar to her in appearance otherwise, and I could tell she was kinda comparing herself to her. We had a pleasant conversation overall, but I think it was a mixed bag of feelings for all parties. I definitely felt a boost to my ego, but sympathetic for what I assumed was a bit damaging to her self-esteem. I'm not sure why I felt bad because that girl definitely broke my heart back in the day. My fiancé asked me who she was afterwards and I filled her in on the details. She is a very humble person, but I could see a gleam of pride in her eyes as well. We went home, unboxed the TV and went to town on each other. She was a friend of a friend that came over to England from Poland on holidays. When I drunkenly asked her out, she rejected me and called me such a freaking pushover. It hurt quite a lot and stuck with me. Fast forward a few years to now, she moved to England and is a common person in my friend circle, so it was inevitable we'll have to hang out. To my surprise, she did a complete 180 with her attitude towards me, always compliments me, wants to hang out, talk. When we're drinking, she gets really touchy and flirty. It's a nice feeling to prove someone wrong, but I'm definitely not shooting a second shot with this one. She was a cheerleader and belonged to a wealthy family in my small town. I was gangly and in band. I joined the military and moved away. About 15 years after high school, I was back home to see friends and was filling up at a gas station. I hear my name and see a woman who looked like time had been really hard on her. I was honestly expecting her to ask me for money based on her appearance. Turns out she'd married a handsome guy who was small-town rich because he'd been selling drugs. I assume she became a user because she was a shell of the once gorgeous, full-bodied 18-year-old I knew. I asked around and her husband, ex-baby daddy, had been caught up in a sting that took him and a bunch of other elites down and sent them to the pen for around a decade. My run-in with her was back in 2010, editing for clarification. I just looked her up on FB and she appears healthier, working for her dad's business. Thanks for reminding me of this. I'm glad to see she looks well. Like a year or so after we broke up, ran into the ex while doing some shopping with current GF, just said hello to each other and continued our way. After that, GF said, "So that's your ex, right?" I don't know if you noticed, but she gave me a pretty nasty look, and apparently she followed us for a while inside the store. Magnificently. I was picked on and beat up very regularly as a kid. There was one girl I really liked, but she ended up participating in picking on me because a few found out I had a crush on her. Years later, I'm visiting home from college and stopped at the mall, early 2000s. Who goes to the mall anymore, am I right? And lo and behold, there she was dress shopping at the mall. By this time I'm no longer pudgy, I'm fit, a few tattoos, and with the greatest sense of confidence I've ever had. She walked up and said, "OMG OP. You look great. How have you been? Blah blah blah." Gave a quick rundown of my situation. She then asked me if I wanted to do anything that weekend while I'm in town. With a smile, I said, "No. I have plans. Have a great day." And walked away. It felt so great to do that. Like, wonderful. And it's been at least 15 years since that moment. Strange story really. I was a punk. She did ballet. We both wanted each other, but her friends didn't like me. I guess it was my baggy clothes. We'll fast forward 5 years later. I'm on stage doing a gig near our hometown. I look down and see her and her friend staring right at me in the front row. Word is she's got some kids now. I hope she's happy. I met this girl in freshman college. She was Christian, friendly, and cheerful. We clicked initially, but fell off as we didn't have the same friend group. We didn't keep in touch at all, and we didn't have any classes that matched times, but we were in the same major. Nearing senior year in college, I see her on campus and I decided to chat to see what's happening with her since I won't be able to see her after graduation. Turns out she has had this drug addiction and life wasn't treating her well. We texted for a solid week and then she ghosted me. Never saw or heard from her again. So I hope she's still alive and off her addiction. Technically she didn't reject me, but her parents did. We met when she was in 8th grade and I was in 9th. We dated on and off. First time we broke up, her parents found out about us and had a split. Her parents wanted her to focus on school to be in the medical field for her future, while I wanted to do something in music, so her parents didn't like that also. Fast forward, we bumped into each other some years after we graduated high school. Went on a couple dates and caught up with each other's lives. She was still in school to be a nurse, but didn't like it and wanted to be a teacher. I just started my music career in performing and teaching. After a couple dates we stopped talking for a few years. I guessed her parents still didn't like the idea of me being a musician and wanted her to be someone who can financially take care of her. A few years after that, I randomly get a call from her and asks what I've been up to, am I married yet, and all that. She tells me she has a boyfriend that is in school to be a doctor and she's working on being a teacher. I, still single since then, was heartbroken and ended up being depressed. We texted for a while and then she suddenly ghosted me. Another few years later, last month, she calls me again. We talk. She's now a full-time teacher and is still with her boyfriend and is very happy. I stopped being depressed and my music career to pursue something in culinary. I miss her dearly. Ex-GF cheated and left me for a co-worker and they ended up getting married, which killed me. Heard through the grapevine that they couldn't conceive BC of fertility issues. Ran into them with my wife and kids and she looked devastated when she saw them. She re-added me on social media that night, but I rejected all friend requests. Felt bad for her, but also not bad.